We'll go back to Hollywood in a few minutes' time, but let's just get very local now and very UK-ish. Every school in England is going to have to provide at least 32.5 hours of teaching every week under new government plans.
It comes as 200,000 children are off school due to coronavirus. The Education Secretary Nadhim Zahawi joins us now from Westminster. Very good morning to you.
Morning, Susanna. How are you?
Very good. It's the talking point of the moment, so I'm going to ask you right now. You are Education Secretary. There will be children going into school classrooms today and then into the playground. If a child says to their teacher, that boy said something mean about my girlfriend, so I'm going to hit him, I saw Will Smith do it, what do you say as Education Secretary?
Say violence is never the answer to anything, and it was heart-wrenching to see Will Smith, one of my favourite actors, getting his first Oscar, but that tearful apology was the right thing he did. I would also say that making fun of somebody's illness, and his wife, as Lorraine just said, has got alopecia, is below the belt. I think Chris Rock shouldn't have done that. But, you know, Will Smith got the Oscar for one of the, I think, the best films of the year in King Richard, the father of Serena and Venus Williams, because his focus wasn't just on their tennis and making them great tennis players, but on their education. He made sure that actually they completed their education. They spoke several languages. They did brilliantly. A real, hero and a sort of fantastic role model for parents in terms of making sure that their children fulfill their dreams, but also get a great education with it.
Why have you felt it necessary to issue this statement saying that all schools in England should provide 32.5 hours by September 23? Because most of them do already, don't they? I mean, this isn't really an issue, is it? We don't have a problem.
You're right, Richard, to say it. Thousands of them do already, but I've always said I'll be the evidence-led Secretary of State. Like we did on vaccines, we'll share the evidence. For every 20 minutes a day less in a school with their teachers, with their classmates, sharing knowledge, that's 2 weeks less in education a year. So actually getting all schools to 32.5 hours is the right thing to do. The high-performing multi-academy trusts do that really well already with their schools, and I want to make sure everyone does it. I hope everyone can get there by the end of this year. Some schools have said to me, logistically, because they've got transport contracts and other challenges, they won't be able to do it till next year, so we're giving them till next year in the white paper. But ultimately, you've heard me talk about my backstory coming to this country without the ability to speak English and hiding at the back of the class, trying to string words together in my head, but having parents who understood the value of education. I want the education system to deliver for every child in the right place at the right time for them. I don't believe children in Knowsley are less talented than children in Kensington. I've got to make sure that they've got a great teacher in the classroom, because that's the greatest determinant of quality education, is having a great teacher.
So why is it then that in the areas where schools do close earlier than others, these are mostly deprived areas? It's deprived areas that you'll see the final bell going, as it were, sometimes before 3 o'clock. Why is it in deprived areas that schools close earlier than they do in better off areas? What's going on there?
So not necessarily always that, but you're right to say that in parts of the country, so in the Levelling Up white paper with Michael Gove, what I did was we looked at what we call the education investment areas. There are 55 parts of the country where we've got a lot of schools that are not performing to the required standards, so below good, so they're requiring improvement. 400 schools, in fact. And my big focus is on those schools to make sure we get them into high-performing families of schools, high-performing multi-academy trusts, and support them to improve the outcomes. Also supporting teachers. We're investing £250 million in teacher training, so the early careers framework, as it's called, so the first, as you qualify as a teacher, in the initial teacher training, and then later in life in further professional development. All that makes a huge difference to outcomes. We've done well in terms of, when we came into office in the coalition, only 68% of schools were good or outstanding. It's now 86%, but, and there is a but here, only 2/3 of primary school children complete primary school with the ability to do reading, writing and maths to an adequate standard.
Can I suggest one of the reasons, Nadhim Zahawi, and I heard you talking about this over the weekend.
Yeah.
Core state school spending per pupil in England fell by 9% in real terms between 2010 and 2020. At the same time, private school fees rose by 23% in real terms. The gap between state school funding and the private sector is widening. And we have seen the gap in results widen as well. In 2019, there was a 24 percentage point gap between independent schools and comprehensives in A-stars and A's. In 2021, the gap rose to 31 percentage points. You've just said on air, you don't want pupils in more privileged areas to do better than those in less privileged areas because the talent should be the same. Why aren't we funding our state schools properly?
So I got 7 billion in the spending review into schools. So total schools budget will go to over 56 billion by 2024, 25.
We're talking about 10 years or more of austerity. And we have that
Susanna,
level of investment has flatlined.
I'm going to try and answer the question. Just give me no more than 30 seconds, if I can.
What is the justification for it?
Well, I'm going to say to you, so when we came into office in the coalition, we had to recover from the financial crisis of 2008-9, which collapsed the economy and had to make some tough decisions. And then, of course, we had the pandemic where Rishi put 400 billion to protect jobs, 14 million people on furlough. In the spending review, I got 7 billion to invest in schools to get us back up to pre-09 levels of investment
Mr. Zahawi,
into education.
I'm asking you, why did you deprive state school pupils of a quality education by taking money away from them to fix what happened in the banking crisis? Why did state school pupils have to suffer?
Well, first of all, there are schools in the state system, multi-academy trusts, have continued to outperform, which is the ones I want to scale and learn from them as to how they did that so well. But to your point, in the spending review, when I became Secretary of State, I got that investment. I got 7 billion into education.
We're talking about when you became Education Secretary. You were only recently Education Secretary. These pupils have had more than 10 years of underfunding. Have you seen the impact on state schools?
Well, hold on a second. I've had the OECD, the head of the OECD Education, Andreas Schleicher, in my office, and he said to me, on schools, you're in the upper quartile of investment in schools in the United Kingdom. So you're in a good place on investment. I've got 7 billion for schools. I've got 5 billion for recovery. I will invest that. I'll make sure that those children get that additional attention that they need to recover.
Mr. Zahawi, that's
and
not going to work for the pupils who had to suffer under austerity. Your own catch-up czar said that they needed £15 billion invested. You've just admitted you're only putting 5 billion in catch-up. Honestly, don't you think your own government has catastrophically let down state schools over the period of time they've been in power?
So when we came into office, Susanna, only 68% of state schools were good or outstanding. Today, it's 86%. But we're not resting on our laurels. I'm saying to you, I want to go much further. I want 90% of primary school children to complete primary school with the ability to do reading, writing and maths to a high standard. That's in my white paper. The OECD, I just talked to you about where we are in terms of spending on our education system in schools in the upper quartile. Back to the words of Kevin Collins, I've got 5 billion. Now, when I was the vaccines minister, I wasn't interested in vaccines being in the warehouse. I wanted them in people's arms. And the same thing applies to education. I want that 5 billion of recovery to be spent on the national tutoring program. We've just announced we've done 1 million blocks of tutoring. We're going to do 2 million by the end of this academic year, 6 million by the end of this parliament. I will publish the data. I'll come on your programme and you'll see where we are on recovery. We're doing well in primary recovery. We need to do the same again in secondary recovery. But this is about delivering and focusing and being obsessed about outcomes for children rather than getting into a sort of a bidding war as to how much I can announce, because actually scale is tough. But we're about to announce our 10,000th academy. I have 22,000 schools. That's real scale, learning from the best academies, the high-performing ones, is the right thing to do, because that's how I deliver opportunity for the children in
Okay,
Knowsley,
Minister.
the same as I do for Kensington.
OK, we'll hold you to that undertaking. We'll see you here with the figures when you've got them. Thank you very much indeed.